like to introduce Anastasia Marks to you. After graduating from Villanova in 2017, Anastasia went on to the University of Maryland and earned degrees in both journalism and government and politics. In 2020, she was hired as a multi-platform editor at the Washington Post in the nation's capital. At the beginning of 2022, she moved to the New York Times. She now edits breaking news content as well as long-form features covering science and health, including the coronavirus pandemic, NASA developments, and the awarding of Nobel Prizes. The most important skill, Anastasia says, that she learned at Villanova was time management, which taught her to take on multiple projects and responsibilities effectively and efficiently. I'm so very proud to welcome Anastasia Marks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Buns and Villanova, for having me. I can see you guys clapping. I just can't hear you, so thanks for the applause. It's so nice to be sort of back. I was actually back for the Alumni Barbecue in June and see so many familiar faces and the names of teachers that I had in my 4 years at Villanova. So yeah, I will share my screen and get started. If you cannot see me or hear me at any point, please let me know. But I will do my best. So hi, I'm Anastasia Marks. I am currently an editing resident at the New York Times here in New York City. I am right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, if any of you have ever been to New York City. And today I'm going to be talking about journalism and the importance of self-starting. There we go. So a little bit about me. I graduated from Villanova in 2017. I was a commuter student. I was born and raised in Carpinteria, California. So I don't know if you guys still have the carp fan, but that was me every morning. While at Villanova, I was involved in 15 million things, as any teacher there could tell you, but my big things really all the time were mock trial, theater, swim, and water polo. And I sort of found journalism by accident a little before I got to Villanova, and then really committed to it and what it was as I went through school. That's actually how I picked the University of Maryland. I finished, like Mr. Bunt said, with 2 degrees from the University of Maryland in College Park. So go Terps. If you are like a sports person or an ESPN person, Scott Van Pelt, who's on SportsCenter, and Dominique Foxworth, who are on a lot of different shows, are also Terp alums. If you're a book person and you grew up reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Jeff Kinney is a Maryland alum. And if you just like cool stuff, Sergey Brin, who's the founder of Google, is also went to Maryland. And my big things while I was there were also mock trial. I joined a sorority, and I also got really, really into journalism while at Maryland. That was the thing I knew I wanted to do my whole life. And that was like really what I went on. That's why I went to Maryland. It's about 7 miles outside of Washington, D.C. The Washington Metro runs to College Park, which is where the school is. So it's really a great opportunity, or it was a great opportunity to really get your feet wet with journalism. The university is home to the Diamondback, which was one of the top college newspapers in the country and still is. I'm a proud alumni of that as well. And after that, I got a job at the Washington Post as a multi-platform editor, which is essentially a copy editor. So I was reading breaking news, I was reading long form things, I did big projects, small projects, every project in between. I worked on the web, I worked on print, I worked on social, I did a little bit of everything. So my case was also a little weird though, because my first internship was at the Times, where I am now. I then had to go back and finish my degree, got a job at the Post, was there for a year, and then came back to the New York Times, and where I'm now an editing resident, which is honestly the dream, just like in the way it works. COVID was really odd, and I think threw a wrench into a lot of people's lives, including mine. But I really enjoy what I do, and I hope I'm able to help you guys out. So what do I do? What is journalism? What is being an editing resident? So I currently work on the science desk. So I work on things about NASA. I work on the coronavirus coverage, my desk. We worked on the Nobel Prizes. I led the coverage on that as well. General health things. So for NASA, if anyone's into space, NASA is currently working on the launch of its latest and last moon mission that they've had in years, called the Artemis launch. It hasn't worked yet, but they're working on it. But things like that. I also worked on the DART asteroid strike, where NASA launched essentially a rocket into an asteroid to see if they could alter its path. It worked. So live big coverage, things like that, really having to like deal with the breaking news things and working with a lot of different reporters and other editors to make sure, okay, the coverage is right, it's fast, it's going the way it's supposed to go, and we're updating everything as constantly as we can to make sure that people know what's going on, especially with weird kind of kooky things like this. For the coronavirus, my desk was doing a lot of that, and really just about like White House coverage, CDC updates, NIH updates about whether it was vaccines, different guidelines, different things that they were saying we should do or shouldn't do, or boosters or things like that. That's really was falling under my desk's purview a lot. And that really was the bane of our existence for a very long time. We also do Nobel Prize work. So like I said, I was leading that coverage. That was very interesting because my desk runs the science only Nobel Prizes. So that was chemistry, physics, and physiology and medicine, which is really, really cool. Even if you're not into science, because it's sort of complicated in the way it worked out for us. I had to be up at 5:30 a.m. every day to make sure that we were getting all the coverage ready, working with our team in London because we have an international newsroom, working with the London team, making sure all of the breaking news was in, making sure my reporters here in the city were awake so they could start putting together their news at about 6 a.m, talking to people who were also trying to figure out what was going on in Sweden and Norway, where the awards were being presented, and just making sure all of the stories came together and also being able to explain it to people. I think one of my favorite things about my job is that journalism requires you to be able to take really weird and complicated information and be able to disseminate it to people in the way it's understandable. And sometimes even when we get the information from different sources, it's a little bit garbly, or it's a language that they understand, but maybe not necessarily everyone else understands. So being able to take something like quantum physics, learn it in 20 minutes, and be able to explain it to other people is a really cool experience, and successful when we can see how well the page views are doing, or if someone says, I don't get it. We also do things about health in general. One of my favorite things about my job is that I read a lot about really promising treatments for diseases like cancer or ALS or Alzheimer's, because it just gives you a little bit of hope in society about the weird things. We also just edit cool stuff. I'm not gonna lie. One of my favorite things about my job is also I will be the person who has weird animal facts every day. That's one of the cool things about journalism, is you learn a lot about a lot of things really quickly, and you are the person who is able to spit them out whenever. So this was one of my favorite things I worked on. This was from this week. It's about these sarcastic fringehead fish, and if that looks like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things, good, it should. These are fish that use their mouths to scare each other. So sometimes I read about this, and I get to work with reporters on things that are really weird and cool. And I figured this was a good image to explain what that looks like. I hope you enjoyed the fish. And sometimes I write. It's very rare, but sometimes I write. So something I was really lucky to work on was the Webb telescope. NASA launched this massive telescope last year, and it started taking a lot of really cool pictures from super deep space. And this was one of them. It's from this galaxy that they figured out, basically a galaxy ran into another galaxy, and they ran into each other, and one kept going, and it left this behind. So what is journalism like? Journalism, honestly, is a little bit of everything. You don't have to be a writer to be in journalism. You can do a lot of different things. So this is the article that I worked on myself, but it can be a little bit of everything, because I know when people think of journalism, they think of writing. You don't have to be a writer. You don't really even have to like writing. I know a lot of journalists who don't. That's the secret that they never tell you. It's okay. Journalism is writing, but it's also all of these things. It's documentary working on, it's investigations, it's social media, it's podcasting, it's TV broadcasting, it's TV production, it's data, it's editing like I do. It really is a lot of different things. There's a niche for anyone who just cares about it or wants to be able to tell stories, or even just like if you're really, really into like numbers and you just want to pour through data and you love looking for patterns in spreadsheets and Excel is your favorite thing in the world, there's a home for you in journalism. It's not weird. I have friends who are really big into data and have just made that their passions. If you're an editor, I don't know if you all still use a writer's reference. It was a required reading it was required to have when I was at Villanova. But if you're really good at remembering like the rules of grammar, the rules of punctuation, a writer's reference is your best friend. If you have a writer's reference memorized, you would be a great editor. If you're really into social media work and like managing different accounts, there's always a place for that. And I think it's really blown up in the last few years, is news organizations getting onto social media, trying to reach younger generations, younger than me, more of your age, and being able to teach people things. It's also a lot of investigative work. If you're into podcasts, I feel like everyone's into podcasts now. That's also something, whether it's news or otherwise. You can also be on TV. Some of my friends are on TV. That's really cool. They're really into that. But if you're like interested in making videos and vlogging and that kind of stuff, there's also a home for it there. So journalism can be very challenging. It's super fun. It's also a little bit tough because sometimes the queen dies and it just becomes your whole day. And you go, okay, this is just our week now. We're reporting on the queen all week. Awesome. The prime minister resigns. Liz Truss resigned, I think last week now. We also tend to lose track of time because we measure time in stories a little bit. Supreme Court rulings, Nobel Prizes that are awarded. It's really, really cool. It's also kind of hard some days, but it's fun. And we get to learn a lot of things. I will say the most complicated thing, like I said, is still trying to take super complicated topics and really make them accessible to people. I talk a lot about science because I'm on the science desk, which is probably kind of ironic because I failed the IB Chem test and did not like chemistry and math, but I report on science now, so it's fine. Journalism is also super rewarding. It's important work. It's so satisfying. So while I was at the Washington Post, I don't know if you can see up in this top left corner, we did this project. I was recruited for this project called the Invisible Project, where it was several long form stories about these countries that had a guarantee to do a climate pledge, but some of them were not reporting their data correctly about how much carbon emissions they were letting off, and it was causing bigger problems. Some were probably lying about their data, some just weren't being entirely factual, some weren't putting in all of the numbers. And the Post did a really interesting series about trying to go through all of the numbers and all of the reports and trying to figure out where the gaps were. The New York Times also has a reputation for some of the biggest stories of being the paper of record. So the Harvey Weinstein, now I guess the Harvey Weinstein accusations that became actual trials and sent him to jail were broken from the New York Times, from Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey. They actually have a movie coming out about it called She Said in November. And then also we report on fun stuff. Like something else I worked on was before chickens were nuggets, they were revered. Apparently before chickens were domesticated, people used them as like worship idols. So it can be a little bit of everything. So how do you get into journalism? Read a lot, write a lot, seriously write a lot. Whether you like it or not, you're gonna have to write something. But some of it is, even if you hate writing, you can learn to be good at it. You can learn to enjoy it. Write constantly, even if it's something simple. Blogs are really big, Substack, Medium. If you're on Twitter all the time, it's a great way to just get the practice in, to write about things you know. I know when you're in school, the first thing you think is, oh my God, I cannot write another paper, oh my God. Or I have IB English, I don't want to care about it. Write 500 words on something you actually like doing. If you just want to like look at the world around you and write about something at the beach, that's fine too. Make something up. It'll help to just at least practice. Be willing to learn. No one likes being criticized, but understand that it's something that's going to make you better as a journalist, as a person in general. Something I've learned in journalism on both sides of it, you can be a really, really talented journalist, but the people that are most fun to work with are the ones that are going to be able to take your edits and can take direction and that'll talk to you about like what you need to work on, but also are willing to like go with what you're doing. Which is probably really rich coming from me for some of these teachers, because I was very stubborn in English and never wanted to change my essays and got into a couple different arguments about it. Also, take a class if you can. I know the community colleges nearby do journalism classes. That's actually how I got my first real experience with journalism, was just learning to take classes if you can. Also, they're really good for college credit. Fun fact, helps you graduate early and spend less money in college. If you can, freelance also, local papers, online magazines, if you want to write something for them, or just reach out and say, I want to learn to write for you. How do I do that? Some are actually pretty open to it, especially with smaller magazines, especially for things you're interested in. Go for stuff you're interested in. Have a good time. It's a lot of fun. Just do the things that you care about, do the things you want to know about. If you're really into fashion, write about that. If you're really into the beach, write about that. If you're really into magazines, or honestly, write about that. If you want to write on the industry, or you want to write about how much your homework sucks, that's fine too. And then to be a self-starter. So what does that mean? Being a self-starter is, first, do your research. Be open in high school or in college. Find the thing that you love and work towards finding the things that you do love. If you are curious about a certain industry, whether it's journalism or honestly otherwise anything, do your research, look into it, look into what you want to do, look into the things that come out of that industry, and be willing to just learn about a lot of different things. If there's something that calls to you, great. If there isn't something that calls to you, it's okay, you can keep working on it, but definitely look into things as you go. That's our biggest piece of advice for that. Advocate for yourself. People love people who take initiative. I love people who take initiative. Everyone loves someone who takes initiative. So my best example of this is that you can have fun with journalism. So like I said, I worked for my college paper at the University of Maryland. It was called the Diamondback. And one of the things I decided my sophomore year that I really wanted to do, I said, we are running a print edition on April Fool's Day. Nothing on this thing is real. All of this is fake. But I decided, and I went to my editor-in-chief and I said, we're doing an April Fool's edition. This is the thing I really care about and want to do. Couldn't tell you why. And he said, okay, you have to figure it out. You start working on it. You build a team for it. And we did. And it was super fun. We ran a fake front page. We decided comp sci was one of the biggest majors on campus. So we said that the comp sci building was going to become a dorm. The light rail line was going to run in the most obnoxious way humanly possible. They were placing a local watering hole with an Amazon HQ, and we retooled one of the school's mottos. It was something small, but it was something that we really wanted to do, and I really wanted to do, and was able to get the ball rolling on. And I'm really glad, because I'm 23 now, and I think in all my 23 years, this is still one of my favorite things I've ever done. And this was the only copy I could find of it, but here you go. Find your niche. So like I said earlier, if you can find something that you care about, that you know you love, and especially if there's not someone already there in that space, make that your space. Take up the space. Please take up the space. There is always a place for someone who wants to do something like this. And if you have some weird specific interest within one thing, people make a lot of money off of that. I'm not going to lie. People make brands off of that. I have friends who have become very well known on Twitter locally just for being the experts locally on one specific thing. And a lot of people will go to them for that thing. Some people really get into the weather and become like the weather guy. I'm not sure if any of you follow the Washington Post on TikTok, but Washington Post TikTok guy became a huge deal in journalism because no one else was really making news TikToks, and he made it his brand and his thing, and they grew out the team, and it became really, really successful. If you're going to be an expert on this one kind of blizzard in South America, or the way K-pop is affecting the economy, or how sports is a factor in American prosperity, whatever it is, I don't know if any of those things are true, but if they are, feel free to let me know. Be willing to fail. And I know that's really difficult coming from Villanova students, because especially in a place that's so small, it feels like every embarrassment is just so magnified. Everyone knows when you messed up. Everyone knows. Everything feels so huge if you make the tiniest mistake. It's okay. You're inevitably not going to be good at something. No one's good at everything. You'll inevitably be good at something else, though. Just to the seniors, if you don't get into your top school, I promise you're going to be fine. You're not this huge failure. I didn't get into my top school. It's going to be okay. I promise you it's going to be okay. But I'm really glad actually that I didn't get into my top school, because a lot of things ended up the way they are because of the school I went to, and it was a different place than I expected to be. But in all of that, be willing to just be bad at stuff and try again and find a new home in things, because it's okay. And sometimes when you mess up and you end up on a different route, it's the route you were supposed to be on anyways. So there you go. Questions? I know that was all really quick. I'm going to stop sharing also. It looks like we already have a question from Ms. Grant. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to let everyone know, please put your questions in the chat for Anastasia. And then it looks like she knows how to work the chat, so she can pick them for you guys, and then she'll go ahead and answer them.
So Miss Grant, hi, Miss Grant. When did you know you wanted to be a journalist? What made you move from the Washington Post to the New York Times? So I decided on journalism in a really weird way. I sort of fell into it. It seemed really cool as a child to be paid money to fly around the world and ask people really annoying questions, because I asked a lot of annoying questions growing up. And journalism seemed like a really great way to do that. So I got into it that way. Ironically enough, I didn't become a reporter. I figured out also that I was really good at editing people's papers by like just fixing their punctuation and their grammar and telling them, hey, you use a comma in the wrong place, or knowing how a semicolon works. You can get paid money to do that. And no one told me that growing up. So that's most of what I do now. What made you move from the Washington Post to the New York Times? So I was at the Times originally as an intern. My first internship, ironically enough, was with the Times. I got incredibly lucky. I'm so incredibly fortunate. And I got hired at the Post after the fact. I was supposed to be an intern. I got hired. And then I came back. I came back because of this new program that I wanted to do. I really wanted to be able to grow my skills specifically as an editor. And in the position that I'm doing now is a little bit different from what I was doing then. I'm doing a lot more deep, intensive reads on long form things. I'm not just looking for fact things. I'm looking for structure things. I'm basically trying to help people shape their papers and their stories now versus doing more of the minute work. How often do you get to pick the news you wanted to write about instead of being assigned one? So I actually don't write a lot. The story that I worked on about the galaxy did come to me from the editor that oversees me, because he knows I'm really into space, and said, hey, do you want to write something? And I said, sure. And he said, okay, great. You're going to write about it in 2 days, which is actually pretty normal turnaround in journalism. But sometimes I get to, Mrs. Miller now, sorry. Sometimes I get to choose things. And sometimes for reporters, they do get to actually pick and choose what they want to do. If they see something that's really interesting, they can pitch it to an editor and say, hey, here's this interesting phenomenon. I want to write about it. Let's talk about it. So it really depends on the person, and it depends on the desk, and it depends on the publication or field you're working in. As a journalist, is it difficult to write about topics where people have extremely divided opinions? Yes, especially when those opinions you may not agree with. Sometimes it can be difficult, and trying to make sure that you are addressing things in the way that they need to be addressed, whether you agree with them or not, can be really frustrating. But it also is something that is important to journalism, is to be able to understand. Other than time management, what other skills do you feel you acquired at Villanova that you are still using today? Am I still acquiring it? What did I acquire at Villanova that I'm still using today? I think one of the big things that I took from Villanova, and I think that I use the most, is really being open to new experiences, talking to new people especially with different backgrounds than you. I know it can be very off-putting when you move to the city, to just the world gets so much bigger very, very quickly. And it kind of freaks you out a little when you go from a school of, I think, under 300 kids, 400 kids, to a school of 40,000 people. But it is just understanding that not everyone's going to have the same experience as you, trying to be open to that, being willing to listen, and just learning a lot about different people, whether that's through International Day at Villanova or finding different communities when you're in college. Hi, Mr. Roney. I just saw your question. What was the hardest part about college? Oh God. Can I say COVID? COVID was real difficult. COVID was weird. It hit my junior year. That was a little weird. My fun fact for the rest of my life is that I think the WHO declared someone declared the pandemic on my 21st birthday, which was a very weird experience. But I will say that was one of the big things. One of the other, I think, bigger things about college, I moved across the country. I didn't really get homesick necessarily, but I think one of the weirdest things was understanding you're going to meet a lot of different people who are in very different places than you are, and really understanding that not everyone is in the same spot that you are mentally, emotionally, physically, on a maturity level. And that's something I think I really wasn't prepared for when I left Villanova. And so some of it is just being open to everyone's experiences and understanding that you are not in the same place anymore, and not everyone is going to be on your same level. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is however you treat it. Ms. Jones, great talk. When do you need to get reliable information for science articles? Where are the sources you use most often? We use a lot of science journals, honestly. A lot of our information comes from there. We get a lot of stuff from the NIH, different studies that they do on the dangers of XYZ drug or on the benefits of XYZ drug. A lot of it is also we talk to different academics, people that we know who are experts in the industry that are not involved in whatever thing we're working on, and being able to chat with them. Also, a lot of people do come to us in the sense of the Nobels. We have people reaching out saying, I've worked with whoever person, or I've worked on whatever topic this is, and I can give you a really good insight onto what that means and what this is going to do for the future. My class wants to know about your knowledge of quantum physics. It is whatever you see in the article that we did on quantum physics. That's most of it. I did actually learn quite a bit about quantum physics and like quantum existence in IB Chem, I think my first year. I don't know how much of it stuck, but I do my best. Hi, Ms. Munoz. If you weren't an editor, what part of journalism would you like to do? That is a really good question. I know I actually learned to code because of journalism. It was a requirement for me to do in college, and I actually really, really enjoyed it. I did not think I was going to like it. I'll be honest, I really thought I was going to hate it, and I really liked it. It was a lot of fun, and it's really cool to work in graphics. Both the Times and the Washington Post have amazing graphics teams that do really cool, different interactive style things. One of my favorite things that I worked on last year was this mini golfing simulator with the Washington Post that taught you about gerrymandering. And I thought that was really cool. And it was a really interesting way to learn about how districts are put in different ways, maybe why they shouldn't be put that way. And I think doing projects like that, you know, interactive cool projects that make it accessible for people to learn about different things. Do you evaluate for bias when you're editing? Yes, that is one of my jobs. Hi, Mr. Christen. Thanks for taking time to talk with us. Besides the alumni barbecue, how well do you remain in contact with your Villanova classmates? I would say pretty well with at least a few of them. I met my best friend before we went to Villanova, and we stuck together through Villanova, and we are still best friends to this day. She actually just came to visit me, which was really, really great. There are friends that I still talk to from Villanova that I know I'm going to be friends with for the rest of my life, that will likely be in my wedding, at my funeral, whatever big things come up in this world. That even 3,000 miles away, I have friends who went to school in San Diego who I talk to every week. We would call them out of the blue and say, I don't care if it's 3 hours behind me. We're having a conversation right now about something. And that's, I think, the nice thing is that I can still say that I have friends from high school that I regularly keep in touch with, and I'm actively trying to get in contact with right now for various things that, like, I know I'm going to see them at Christmas or things like that. What story or project that you worked on are you the proudest of? I think I will say the cartwheel story that I wrote is one of the things I'm proudest of, just because I hadn't written in 2.5 years. And writing, I said write a lot. If you don't work the muscle, you kind of forget how to use it sometimes. So I will say that is one of my big things. And also, I think the invisibility project was something that I worked on, and it was huge, and it took a lot of time, it took a lot of energy. And I think it was also just a really important thing to learn, is that climate change and the way we're attacking it as a world isn't always working out, because sometimes it's hard to know what's true and what's not in the terms of how the numbers are being reported to us from other countries who may have incentive to not tell the truth. What advice do you have for students interested in creating a podcast series about life at Villanova? Length, subject matters, production, etc. I would say if you are going to make a podcast for students or prospective students, think about the things that you would want to know if you were that age and approach it from that direction, especially with length. I don't know if you guys really want to listen to long podcasts. Like, I'm into that, but I'm also 23. I don't know what 16-year-olds want to listen to. So go at it with that. Think about the things that you would want to know if you were going into school, or the things that you really care about. And if you have advice for each other, that's also really good too. Was it hard to live in New York? I actually really love New York. I will say the annoying thing about it sometimes is that it's expensive, and sometimes it's very loud. The big thing is that it's loud, and which is fine if you're into the noise, but sometimes when you're trying to go to sleep and there's horns honking, it's a little bit irritating. And I will say the weirdest thing about it is that if you ever go back to Ojai or wherever that's really quiet, it feels really weird, and you will not know what it is for a couple minutes. And then you realize, oh, it's silent, and that's creepy now. But other than that, I do love it. Everything's really accessible. It's really great because I can go up and down the coast, just the East Coast on the Amtrak or driving, and it's a lot easier. You can cross state lines a lot faster also, which is very odd when you're from California. And I didn't realize that you can cross through 4 states in the span of a 2-hour drive, versus if I drive 2 hours up or down, I'm still in California. Or even if I drive 2 hours east, maybe I've hit the Nevada border. What team do you go for in baseball? I actually really don't have a baseball team, which is very strange to people. I love sports, but I don't really watch a lot of baseball. I do have a lot of ties to Philadelphia right now, so I am really excited for the Phillies to win. But there you go. Hi, Ms. Hedrick. Thanks for emphasizing the usefulness of a writer's reference. Next time you're in the area, will you come to my classes and share the beauty of a correctly placed comma? Yes, I will teach them eat, shoots, and leaves. If you know that, great. If you don't, you'll learn it. That's all the questions I can see. I'm not sure if anyone else has any. Oh, here we go. Is it difficult being away from your family, and what position did you play in water polo? I will say sometimes it is a little hard being away from my family. That's the nice thing I think about going home, is that I get to hang out with my mom and my cousins. My cousin had a child actually in February. I still haven't seen her, which is a little rough, but I'm really excited to see her at Thanksgiving. That's my favorite thing. I'm not on TikTok. And what position did you play in water polo? Which year? I played everything, just depending on the year it was. Pick a year. I was D-hole for a really long time, I remember, and I didn't like it because I was a little too small to play D-hole. And I got chucked by a girl at a game against Carp. I got like thrown 5 feet. It was a very weird experience. What was the biggest project you've worked on? I think to date it's probably either the Nobels or the Invisibility Project. The Nobels were my first big thing to do project that I was leading by myself. And that was a very weird experience, but it was also a really, really good one that I'm glad. I learned a lot while working on it and having to work with so many different desks and characters and personalities and projects and topics. It was a really big project and I'm glad I did it. What was your favorite Villanova tradition? Ooh. God, there were so many. Favorite Villanova tradition? Oh God, probably International Day. I did love Mardi Gras. I'm not gonna lie. The beignets were my favorite thing every year. That was probably one of the biggest things. I will say I did miss that, and realizing that I wasn't going to get to have International Day every year while following Villanova's Instagram was really depressing, or seeing it, like, you guys don't use Snapchat anymore, I think, but when we were all on Snapchat, seeing it on everyone's story was very sad, because I would see that I was, freezing in Maryland by myself with my friends, and I would see everyone was outside eating and having a good time. What advice would you give to freshmen, like high school freshmen? High school freshmen, get involved in different things. It's fine. Go with it. Just go with flow. That's my big piece of advice. Just, go with whatever's coming at you. Realize that whatever plan you're going to try to set up is probably not going to be what you're doing in senior year or even junior year. It's fine. Happens. Life happens. And have fun. What was the worst project I experienced? Can't think of anything in particular. I wouldn't even call this the worst. This wasn't at the Times. This was like long ago. I will say sometimes, just like when you realize something has gone wrong right in the middle of it, and you're like working on a really long project and you're about 3,000 words in and you realize that none of this makes sense and you have to start from scratch. That's one of the really annoying things that happen. Hasn't happened in a really long time, I will say, but that's it. What's my Instagram? My Instagram's private. Sorry, guys. New York Times writer David Brooks writes on character. How did Villanova develop your character? How did Villanova develop a character? I think one of the biggest things was really learning to be a team player. I was very independent growing up. I was not like a team sports person. I'm honestly still kind of not. But the first time I ever played a team sport was at Villanova, and I played water polo, and trying to do speech and mock trial and theater was something that I had to really learn to do. And I had to learn to trust other people and trust that they knew best and what I was doing and how to direct me, because that wasn't something I grew up doing. And I think that was something that everyone really has to learn at some point. What other college was I considering, and what was your major? So my majors were journalism, and then I also had a degree in government and politics, which is like Maryland's political science name. What other colleges were you considering? Oh God, I remember I applied to like a million schools. I remember I only looked at 2 schools in California. I looked at Berkeley and I think like San Jose State, Northwestern, like a lot of big journalism schools. USC probably should have been on the list, but it wasn't. Oh God, it's so long ago. I don't even remember now. The questions have kind of slowed down, so I think we're good. Oh, one more. Who is the most important person you've interviewed? Tell us about your experience. Oh God. I don't interview people. I haven't interviewed a lot of people in a really long time. Oh, I will say this. Okay. This was when I was in college, but I will apply it anyways. I had to interview a few people who worked on the College Park City Council about some things that were bothering the students, including like they were putting out a noise ordinance on us and it was becoming this really huge problem. I talked to like the president of student government a couple of times and had to ask him some really tough questions, including about what things he was doing wrong, which he didn't love and hung up on me, but it's fine. That was definitely one of my favorite things though. And it was important though, because it was, he's elected by the students, and it was important to be able to ask him, hey, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Who would you love to interview? God, there's so many people. I could write you a list. I could write you a few lists. Tell how long you got. Someone I know I would love to interview, at least right now. Oh God, there's so many. There are a couple of different people who have worked on different NASA projects that I would love to talk to about just like what they do and how their production works, including the people who are running the Artemis project, or the Artemis, I think it's called the Artemis project, which is the moon launch. What classes do you take in a journalism major? You take a lot of classes. It's really cool. You have to learn to do a million different things. You learn to film, you learn to edit, you learn to shoot photos, you learn how lighting works, you learn how editing works, I learned to code. You have to learn to be on camera. I don't like being on camera. It really sucked, but some people are really into it. You have to learn to write for TV. You learn to write for regular things. You take social media classes. It's a whole litany of things. You also take like history of journalism things.
Does anyone else have any dying questions, burning questions about journalism? It looks like it has definitely petered out.
I try to get all of them, so if there's any missed, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did see one. Do you see James LeBron as your hero? That's definitely a student asked question. A little silly one.
No, because my basketball hero is Tim Duncan.
Okay, it looks like one more question from our college counselor, Aisha King, Miss King.
Going to a large university, how did you stand out to professors coming from a small environment? I will say definitely the big thing is, like I said, in being a self-starter, going to your professors, asking them questions, talking to them, especially if whatever class you're taking is a really important to your degree or just really interesting to you, talking to them about their studies. Most professors are going to be people who are professionals in whatever industry you're trying to go into or whatever subject you're learning about, and they are going to be some of the leading experts on what you want to know. So definitely chatting with them, just demonstrating initiative, showing them that you really care about this class. And it tends to help when you're in the middle of finals and you're falling apart in a class and you don't know what you're going to do for the final. You go and ask them and they help you. If they knew you at the beginning of the semester, it's a lot better than if you come to them at the end of the semester. Okay, I think that's all.
Okay, I think that, So that looks like it will be the end. Thank you so much for joining us, Anastasia, and for everyone's participation today. If you guys have any more questions, how can they reach out to you directly? Do you have an email or
Yes,
anything like that?
I do have
Share
that.
with them.
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at Stasia Says Hey. I will send it out, and you can also email me at anastasia.a.marks@gmail.com. If you email me, I'm more likely to respond. My Twitter DMs, I don't always go through.